fun, cool, and creative club? Raise your hand. Okay, can I get two of you as volunteers? So, I might not have mentioned it before, but joining my club takes a couple of things. First, you got to go through some processes. So can I start off with having both of you plank with your elbows down and pants off on these bottle caps while I pour this hot sauce down your crack?
Sure has.
Yeah, that's what most people would say with the brain. Sadly, this isn't always how it goes. Yeah, you can sit back down. Thank you. I changed it. Sadly, this isn't always how it goes. This happened to a close friend of mine at Washington State University. He was pledging a fraternity, and he was brave enough to tell me about this. According to the findings of National Study of Student Hazing, 9 out of 10 students who have experienced hazing in college do not consider themselves to have been hazed. This statistic is extremely surprising due to the detrimental facts that hazing has been known to cause. As adults, it should be recognized that when an activity is no longer encouraging a team building and causing mental and physical hardship instead, this isn't a team building activity. Cal Poly, especially among colleges, takes the act of hazing very, very seriously. And as college students, for most of us, we are automatically associated with this topic. Whether it is joining a fraternity, club, sports team, or any other organization, hazing occurs every day, no matter where you are. Many people think this issue just involves participants in Greek life, but little do you know that even in ski club or some sports, this topic is very, very detrimental. It's close to me because even though we are at Cal Poly and I have not experienced this in my Greek life time here, I have been in several clubs and sport teams back in high school where I have been hazed. I've had my varsity team of soccer initiation. We all had to put blindfolds on, and we were given just duct tape. You had to put it over your mouth so things wouldn't get in your mouth, and they just threw handfuls of unknown objects and fluids at us, and that was probably the worst I've ever experienced that. So California hazing law defines hazing as any methods of initiation, a student organization, which is likely to cause serious bodily injury to any student in this state. Today I'll be sharing with you some of these methods of organization, a background on them, and why they can be so detrimental. Before we can delve into the detrimental methods of initiation, a bit of background information is necessary. Hazing activities date back to the 387 BC. This was Plato's Academy, and this was the first situation of hazing occurring. As stated by Devin M. Alvarez in his Death by Hazing article, Plato encouraged the young men in his academy to play practical jokes on newcomers because he believed newcomers had to be polished before they could become a regular member. For example, an example of this would be professors at Harvard University institute a law that required freshmen to obey orders from upperclassmen and run errands for the upperclassmen. This started in the 19th century, and student organizations such as literal societies and sports teams began using this hazing policy. Greek-led organizations only took over this practice in the late 1800s, and the first situation of someone dying from these instances was in 1873 by the Kappa Alpha Society at Cornell University. One of the biggest issues surrounding hazing is the scope of who should be held accountable for this issue. Aside from states having different definitions and punishments for hazing, there is also disparity among universities about how they should handle incidents that occur on campus. To avoid a public scrutiny, many universities actually use Family Educated Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, as a shield to avoiding hazing incidences. This is what they say when students come to them with information about hazing and they don't want it to portray their university in a bad way, so they don't portray it at all and just keep it to themselves. As Joseph Walt discusses in Hazing in the Workplaces, responsibilities to hazing range from feeling hurt, embarrassed, frustrated, and outraged to hiding distress. These are all terrible, terrible examples of hazing, and this is why it's important to inform you of a brief background. The first act of hazing is commonly known as subtle hazing. Subtle hazing is often taken for granted and accepted as harmless. Some examples include requiring new members to perform duties not necessarily performed by other actives, requirements of members to specifically greet a member in a different way, or required them to carry certain items at all times on campus. This can all lead to sleep deprivation and stress, which detrimentally affects one's schoolwork and time outside of class. New members often feel obligated to participate in these meaningless tasks to earn respect and feel a part of the organization. Colgate stated that there is emphasis placed on power and imbalance between new members and other members for an organization, thus leading to activities or attitudes that breach reasonable standards of mutual respect and place new members on the receiving end of ridicule and embarrassment. One example of this happened to my other friend, Matt's. Even though it's not necessarily violent or harassing, Matt's had to carry doormats around all day. This was quite embarrassing for him, and this is considered a form of subtle hazing. It does not necessarily hurt Matt's self-esteem or overall physique. It doesn't hurt him in a physical way, but this can affect how others feel about him and how he is perceived by the world around. The second form of hazing is known as harassment hazing. Acts that are considered harassment often cause emotional distress and make one's member feel isolated and often humiliated. Some examples include yelling or screaming at new members of your club or fraternity, wearing uncomfortable clothing, personal chores, and many other acts very similar. These all cause frustration and stress for new members trying to be a part of a new organization. Not only do these also happen in men's sports, but also women. At Washington State AKO, this type of hazing occurred when Maxwell had physical trauma when a girl in the background was yelling at her for her mental health issues and physical attributes. So this girl was being yelled at for how she looked in front of her whole sorority and how she was mentally unstable. This was a very big issue, and this caused this sorority to actually be disbanded from the university. The last and most harmful effective act of hazing is known as violent hazing. Defined as Colgate University as a behavior that has a potential to cause emotional and physical harm. These examples will be much worse than the previous ones. These include paddling, whipping, kidnapping, forced consumption of liquid or liquor, forced alcohol consumption in other forms, and public nudity. Violently hazing can lead to more serious injuries and even death. One example of this was Carson Stakely, a former Cal Poly student who was pledging Sigma Alpha Epsilon when two members, actually they were led by two members of the fraternity in a pledge task where they were all passed around multiple fifths, and Carson ended up having to kill at least half of the fifth on his own. He was then taken to a bedroom where all the other pledges were told he was okay, but really he was unconscious and died on this bedroom in Sigma Alpha Epsilon. This fraternity was immediately disbanded from Cal Poly, but this is one situation where this occurred very close to home, and I'm sure all of you had to see this when you went through WOW training and everything else. Violent hazing can lead to more serious injury and death, and alcohol poisoning is a major occurrence through initiation that causes this. To conclude, any form of hazing is a crime that is punishable by law and should be addressed in that manner in order to prevent injuries to one's mental health and physical health. From its platonic past and prevalence with professional and collegiate sports, hazing is truly seen anywhere. Subtle hazing, harassment hazing, and violent hazing are examples of this terrible process. These actions not only detrimentally affect one's self-esteem, but also the organization as a whole. These hands don't haze, and neither should yours.
Roman, how'd it go?